I never thought I'd hear my son call me a liability to my own grandchildren. But the moment those words left his lips, something inside me, something I'd suppressed for decades, finally awakened. You see, I'd spent 40 years being the woman who smiled through pain, who gave without expectation, who believed family came first no matter the personal cost. That day changed everything. Not just for me, but for the son who thought he held all the cards, the daughter-in-law who treated me like hired help, and the grandchildren whose future was about to take a dramatic turn no one saw coming. The truth I'd kept hidden was about to rewrite our family's entire story. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Judith Thornhill. At 63, I'd spent most of my life in service to others. I was raised in a small town just outside Portland, where hard work wasn't considered a virtue. It was simply expected. My parents owned a modest bookstore that barely kept our family afloat, but they instilled in me values that shaped my entire existence. Education matters, family comes first, and never show the world when you're struggling. I carried those lessons with me when I fell in love with Henry during my first year teaching at Westfield High. He was brilliant, a financial advisor with ambition that seemed limitless. We married quickly, and within a year I gave birth to our son, Christopher. Those early years were a beautiful chaos of midnight feedings and lesson plans sprawled across our kitchen table. Henry's career demanded frequent travel, which meant I juggled motherhood and my teaching career largely alone. When Christopher was 7, Henry's firm offered him a prestigious position that required relocating to Chicago. Without hesitation, I resigned from the teaching position I loved, said goodbye to my circle of close friends, and uprooted our life to support his career. "This move will set us up for life," Henry promised. "The sacrifices are temporary, but the rewards will be permanent." In Chicago, I found another teaching position, though at a school with fewer resources and greater challenges. Every morning, I woke at 5 a.m. to prepare Christopher's lunch, review my lesson plans, and ensure our home ran smoothly. Every evening, I graded papers while cooking dinner, helping with homework, and maintaining the appearance of effortless domestic harmony Henry expected when he returned from his business trips. Christopher flourished in Chicago. Athletic and charming like his father, disciplined and thoughtful like me, he excelled academically and became the captain of his high school swim team. I attended every meet, volunteered for every school function, and spent weekends driving him to competitions across the state. Henry made it when he could, but his absences became so routine that Christopher stopped asking if his father would be there. When Christopher earned a scholarship to Northwestern University, I felt a complex mixture of pride and loss. For 18 years, my days had revolved around his needs. Now, suddenly, I faced the question that haunts many mothers. Who am I when my child no longer needs me? Henry had an answer. "Now you can finally focus on yourself, Judith. Take some art classes. Join that book club you've been talking about." What he didn't say, but what became increasingly clear, was that my role in his life had diminished as well. His world was filled with ambitious colleagues, impressed clients, and a social circle I never quite fit into despite my efforts. 2 years into Christopher's college experience, Henry came home from a conference and announced he'd accepted a position in London. "It's the opportunity of a lifetime," he said, already packing his suitcase for a preliminary trip. "We can sell this house, find something nice in Kensington. You'll love it there." I didn't love it there. I felt like a ghost haunting elegant rooms, smiling politely at dinners where conversations about market trends and portfolio diversification swirled around me. I missed my students. I missed the purpose that came with teaching young minds. I missed America. 6 months after our move, I found the emails. Henry had been building a life parallel to ours, one that included a junior analyst named Diane. The evidence suggested this life had been under construction for years. When confronted, Henry didn't deny it. "We've grown apart, Judith," he said, with practiced composure. "We both know our marriage has been more about convenience than passion for a long time." The divorce was quick, but brutal. Henry's legal team worked to characterize my contributions to our marriage as minimal, my sacrifices as routine, my future needs as modest. What saved me was a prenuptial agreement Henry had ironically insisted upon to protect his future earnings. An agreement that entitled me to a significant portion of our marital assets regardless of fault. Christopher, then 22 and about to graduate, struggled with the revelation of his father's betrayal. "I always thought you two were solid," he said during a painful phone call. "How could he do this to you? To us?" I moved back to the States, settling in Seattle where my college roommate Eleanor had built a successful interior design business. She offered me a position managing her studio's operations, a complete departure from teaching, but a welcome distraction from the collapse of my personal life. What no one knew, not Henry, not Christopher, not even Eleanor, was that the divorce settlement included more than just liquid assets and property. It included a substantial ownership stake in a venture capital fund Henry had helped establish early in his career. A fund that, due to a clerical error by Henry's distracted legal team, remained under my control rather than being divided or bought out as originally intended. "It's probably worth nothing," Henry's lawyer had said dismissively, when I questioned the oversight. "Early-stage investments rarely pay off, not worth the paperwork to correct it." I said nothing and signed the papers. For the next decade, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I discovered unexpected talent for business operations, eventually becoming Eleanor's partner in the design firm rather than just an employee. I developed new friendships, took those art classes Henry had suggested, and even dated occasionally, though nothing serious materialized. Christopher graduated, earned his MBA, and followed his father's path into finance, though at a competing firm in Boston. When he met Victoria during a business trip to New York, I was genuinely happy for him. She was ambitious, polished, and came from a family with deep connections in banking and real estate. They seemed well matched, two young professionals ascending rapidly in their respective fields. Their wedding was an elaborate affair at Victoria's parents' estate in Connecticut. Henry attended with Diane, now his wife, and their young twin daughters. I sat alone, smiling until my cheeks ached, accepting polite conversation from guests who viewed me as a footnote in the family narrative. "Christopher looks exactly like his father," Victoria's mother remarked during the reception, champagne glass dangling from her manicured fingers. "Such a handsome family, and Henry has done so well for himself in London. I understand you're working in decorating, is it?" I simply nodded and excused myself to the restroom, where I spent 5 minutes breathing deeply and reminding myself that this day wasn't about me. After the wedding, my relationship with Christopher became increasingly distant. Holiday calls grew shorter. Visits became rarer. When I suggested coming to Boston for a week to help the newlyweds settle into their new brownstone, Victoria politely deferred. "We're still figuring out our own rhythms, Judith. Perhaps later in the year would be better." Later in the year never came. Instead, 3 years into their marriage, Christopher called with news that Victoria was pregnant with twins. "You're going to be a grandmother, Mom," he said, genuine excitement warming his voice for the first time in years. "We just found out. It's a boy and a girl." For the first time since the divorce, I felt a sense of purpose returning. I threw myself into preparing for my grandchildren's arrival, researching the safest cribs, reading the latest books on child development, even taking a refresher course in infant CPR. When Eleanor questioned the intensity of my preparation, I explained simply, "This is my chance to be present in a way I couldn't always be for Christopher because of circumstances." When Emma and Ethan were born, I flew to Boston immediately. The first week was a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and the beautiful chaos I remembered from Christopher's infancy. Victoria's mother, Beverly, was also present, offering constant commentary on everything from the nursery temperature to the proper swaddling technique. In our family, she informed me during a rare quiet moment, we've always used European methods of child rearing. Studies show they produce more independent, successful adults. I bit my tongue and continued folding the tiny laundry that had already begun multiplying exponentially. By the end of the second week, tensions were rising. Beverly had settled into the guest room I had been promised, relegating me to the pull-out sofa in Christopher's home office. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria began questioning my suggestions about feeding schedules and sleep training. Christopher, exhausted and torn between his wife and his mother, began avoiding both by working longer hours. On my final night before returning to Seattle, I offered to take the night shift so the new parents could get some uninterrupted sleep. Around 2 a.m., as I was rocking Emma back to sleep after her feeding, Victoria appeared in the nursery doorway, her expression tight. "Christopher and I have been talking," she said, not bothering with preamble. "We appreciate your help these past weeks, but we've decided to hire a professional night nurse. Beverly has recommended someone with extensive experience and proper training." I felt the familiar sting of dismissal but kept my voice even. "That sounds like a good resource to have. I'm happy to supplement when needed, especially as they get older." Victoria's pause was heavy with unspoken words. "About that, we think it's best if visits are scheduled well in advance. Consistency is crucial for infant development, and too many different caregivers can create attachment issues." I looked down at my granddaughter's sleeping face, memorizing the perfect curve of her eyelashes against her cheek. "Of course," I said softly. "Whatever you think is best." The following years established a pattern. I was permitted carefully orchestrated visits on major holidays. I sent thoughtfully selected gifts that often went unacknowledged. I maintained a digital picture frame that Christopher occasionally remembered to update with photos of my growing grandchildren. When the twins turned 3, I retired from the design firm, selling my partnership share to Eleanor for a generous sum. "What will you do now?" she asked over our farewell dinner. "I'm thinking of relocating to the East Coast," I replied, "to be closer to the twins." Eleanor's skepticism was evident. "Have Christopher and Victoria indicated they want more involvement from you?" "Not exactly," I admitted, "but being physically closer might open up more opportunities." I found a lovely townhouse in a suburb just 20 minutes from Christopher's home. When I called to share my news, his response was lukewarm at best. "That's quite a change, Mom. Are you sure it makes financial sense to uproot your entire life at this stage?" "My financial situation is secure," I assured him, "and this stage of my life is precisely when I should be prioritizing what matters most to me. Family matters most." The reality of being geographically closer proved disappointing. Proximity did not translate to inclusion. Invitations to birthday parties and school events arrived sporadically, often at the last minute. Offers to babysit were consistently declined with vague references to the twins' established routines and Victoria's concerns about consistency in caregiving approaches. Then came the day that changed everything. The twins were approaching their 5th birthday when Christopher called, sounding uncharacteristically flustered. "Mom, we're in a bind. Victoria's parents were supposed to watch the kids this weekend, while we attend a critical work retreat, but Beverly just called with some virus she picked up on her cruise. Our regular sitter is unavailable, and the agency can't find a replacement on short notice." My heart leapt. "I'd be happy to stay with them, Christopher. You know how much I'd enjoy it." His hesitation was palpable. "Victoria has some concerns. You know how particular she is about their routines, their diet, their screen time limits." I raised a child who turned out well enough to meet Victoria's standards, I reminded him gently. I think I can handle following instructions for a weekend. After a muffled conversation with Victoria, Christopher returned to the phone. All right, Mom. We'll drop them off Friday afternoon with detailed notes. But please, stick to the schedule exactly as written. When Friday arrived, I welcomed my grandchildren with barely contained joy. Emma, serious and observant, scrutinized my townhouse with the critical eye she'd inherited from her mother. Ethan, boisterous and affectionate, immediately asked if we could bake cookies, a request Victoria quickly intercepted. We've brought their organic meal kits, she explained, unloading containers from an insulated bag. Everything is portioned and labeled. Their schedule is detailed here, color-coded, by day and activity. Emergency contacts are listed in order of preference. Our pediatrician first, then our family doctor, then Beverly's physician who's agreed to consult remotely if needed. I nodded patiently through the extensive briefing, accepting the binder, of instructions that rivaled my old teaching curriculum guides in detail and heft. Christopher stood awkwardly in the background, occasionally adding unnecessary clarifications like, "They need to brush for a full 2 minutes, Mom. We use this timer app." After 45 minutes of instructions, Victoria checked her watch. "We really should get on the road to beat traffic." She knelt before the twins. "Remember, best behavior for Grandma Judith. Daddy and I will FaceTime tonight before bedtime." Once they departed, I turned to my grandchildren with a smile. "Well, shall we review our mission instructions together?" The weekend unfolded more smoothly than anyone, especially Victoria, had anticipated. I followed the schedule with reasonable fidelity, making only minor adjustments when opportunities for joy presented themselves. Yes, we added chocolate chips to the organic pancakes. Yes, we extended the nature walk to collect interesting leaves and rocks. Yes, I taught them to make paper airplanes during craft time, instead of following the pre-packaged craft kit instructions. By Sunday morning, the twins were relaxed and affectionate in a way I hadn't witnessed during our usually stilted visits. We were in the middle of a pillow fort construction project when Victoria called to check in. "They're still in pajamas?" she questioned, frowning at the video image. "The schedule indicates outdoor playtime from 9:30 to 10:15. "We had a slow morning," I explained. "We'll get to the playground after lunch." After lunch? But that disrupts their entire afternoon sequence. The developmental specialist we consulted was very clear about maintaining consistent activity transitions. Emma suddenly appeared next to me. "Mommy, can we stay at Grandma's house longer? She tells the best stories and doesn't make us eat kale in our smoothies." Victoria's expression tightened. "We'll discuss this when we get home, Emma. Please put Grandma back on." After a few more pointed questions about adherence to the schedule, Victoria ended the call with a terse, "We'll be there by 4. When they arrived to collect the twins, the atmosphere was charged with unspoken tension. Victoria inspected the children as if searching for evidence of nutritional neglect or psychological damage. Christopher busied himself gathering their belongings, avoiding eye contact. "Thank you for helping us out, Judith," Victoria said finally, her tone making it clear this experiment would not be repeated. It was. "Fortunate you were available. On short notice." "Anytime," I replied sincerely. I loved having them. "Grandma taught us to play chess," Ethan announced proudly. "And she knows all about the stars and planets." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "Chess isn't developmentally appropriate for their age, and astronomy isn't part of their core curriculum focus yet." I maintained my composure. "Children often surprise us with what they're capable of understanding when the subject captures their interest." "Well," Victoria said, gathering her designer handbag, "we have our educational approach carefully mapped out with their private preschool. It's best not to introduce conflicting methodologies at this stage." As they prepared to leave, Emma wrapped her arms around my legs. "Can we come back next weekend, Grandma?" Before I could respond, Victoria interjected. Grandma is very busy. Sweetheart. And you have your swimming evaluation next weekend, remember? I knelt down to my granddaughter's level. I'm never too busy for you, Emma. But we'll have to check everyone's calendar to find the right time. As they drove away, I felt the familiar ache of separation. But something else was brewing beneath the surface. A quiet determination that had been building for years. The following Tuesday, Christopher called. His voice had the carefully neutral tone he always adopted when delivering unwelcome news. Mom, Victoria and I have been discussing the weekend, and we feel it might be best to maintain our original childcare arrangements moving forward. I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. The twins came home with some unconventional ideas. They've been questioning their routine, their diet, even their educational activities. They're curious children, I observed. Questioning is how they learn. Yes, but we have a system that works for our family. Victoria feels, we both feel, that at your age, the demands of keeping up with two active 5-year-olds might be too much. The structured environment we've created requires consistent energy and attention to detail. The words hit like individual blows. At your age, too much consistent energy. I see, I said quietly. You think I'm too old to care for my own grandchildren? It's not about age exactly, Christopher backpedaled. It's about alignment with our parenting philosophy. Victoria's parents understand our approach implicitly. Because Beverly dictated it, I couldn't help responding. Christopher's voice hardened. That's unfair, Mom. Victoria and I make our parenting decisions together, based on research and the advice of experts. And where do I fit into that carefully researched equation, Christopher? His silence was answer enough. We value your role as their grandmother, he finally offered. The holiday visits, the birthday celebrations, those are important family connections. But not important enough to trust me with their care for a weekend without considering it a potential liability. Mom, you're twisting my words. Am I? You just called to tell me I'm too old and out of touch to babysit my own grandchildren. I think I'm understanding perfectly. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, watching the afternoon light shift across the countertops. The familiar pattern of hurt, acceptance, and accommodation tried to assert itself, but this time, something different emerged. A lifetime of stepping aside, of prioritizing others' needs and judgments over my own worth, crystallized into perfect clarity. I reached for my phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in years. Martin? It's Judith Thornhill. Yes, it has been a long time. Listen, I need to discuss the Waypoint Fund. Specifically, the educational trust provisions we established. Martin Hayes had been the financial advisor who helped me manage my divorce settlement and subsequent investments. He was one of the few people who knew about my ownership stake in the venture capital fund. The stake that had grown from a supposedly worthless oversight into one of the most successful early-stage investment vehicles in tech. The Waypoint Fund has performed exceptionally, Martin confirmed. Your initial stake has multiplied significantly. The educational trust for your grandchildren is currently valued at approximately $12 million. And I retain full, discretionary control over those funds until the children reach age 25, correct? Absolutely. The trust is irrevocable, but as trustee, you have complete authority over disbursements for educational purposes. We defined that term quite broadly in the documents. Private schooling, enrichment activities, college, graduate studies, even educational travel can qualify. I took a deep breath. I'd like to schedule a meeting next week. There are some amendments I want to discuss. Of course. May I ask what you have in mind? It's time my son and his wife understand exactly who they're dismissing as too old and irrelevant to participate in their children's lives. The silence on Martin's end held a note of respect. I'll clear my calendar for whenever works best for you, Judith. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in years. The woman who had spent decades accommodating others' visions of her worth had finally retired. In her place stood someone new, someone who recognized that wisdom, experience, and love were not liabilities, but powerful assets. And it was time to demonstrate exactly how powerful they could be. Tomorrow I'll share what happened when Christopher and Victoria discovered the truth about who controlled their children's educational future, and how that revelation transformed our family forever. The confrontation in Martin's office was just the beginning of a journey none of us expected, least of all me. The morning of my appointment with Martin, I chose my outfit with deliberate care, a tailored charcoal suit I'd purchased for Eleanor's retirement party, pearl earrings Henry had given me on our 10th anniversary, and the quietly expensive watch I'd bought myself after selling my share of the design firm. I wasn't dressing to impress. I was armoring myself for battle. Martin's office occupied the 15th floor of a steel and glass tower in downtown Boston. The reception area hummed with muted efficiency, assistants gliding between offices, phones ringing at discrete intervals, the subtle scent of fresh flowers and ambition mingling in the climate-controlled air. I gave my name to the receptionist and took a seat, mentally rehearsing the conversation ahead. "Mrs. Thornhill?" Young assistant appeared at my elbow. "Mr. Hayes will see you now. He mentioned your son and daughter-in-law will be joining shortly." I smiled. Perfect. Martin rose from behind his desk as I entered, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "Judith, wonderful to see you. It's been too long. Thank you for arranging this on short notice." "Not at all. I've always enjoyed our collaborations." He gestured to the seating area by the window, where a coffee service awaited. "I must admit, I was intrigued by your request to include Christopher and Victoria in our meeting. I thought it was time for some family financial transparency," I replied, selecting a chair that would allow me to observe the door. Martin nodded, thoughtfully. They seemed quite surprised by my call. "Christopher mentioned you'd never discussed the Waypoint Fund with him." "There's never been a reason to, until now." We exchanged pleasantries about the market and Martin's recent vacation to Portugal until a sharp knock interrupted us. The assistant ushered in Christopher and Victoria, both dressed in corporate battle armor of their own, he in a navy suit that probably cost a month of my former teacher's salary, she in a cream-sheath dress with a designer blazer and heels that announced ambition with every step. "Mom?" Christopher's confusion was evident as he registered my presence. "What's going on?" Mr. Hayes's office said there was an urgent matter regarding the twins' educational planning. "That's exactly right," I confirmed, gesturing to the empty seats. "Please, join us. This won't take long." Victoria remained standing, her posture radiating reluctance. "We have a meeting with the admissions director at Grayson Academy in 40 minutes. If this could be rescheduled." "I'm afraid this directly impacts your meeting at Grayson," Martin interjected smoothly. "Please, Mrs. Williams, I believe you'll find this worth your time." The use of her married name rather than her preferred professional surname caused Victoria's eyebrow to twitch, but she complied, perching at the edge of a chair while Christopher settled beside her. "As I mentioned on the phone," Martin began, opening a leather portfolio, "this meeting concerns the educational trust established for Emma and Ethan Williams. Mrs. Thornhill has requested a review of the current provisions and possible amendments to the disbursement protocols." Christopher's brow furrowed. "Educational trust? Mom, what educational trust?" I met his gaze steadily. "The one I established 5 years ago, when the twins were born. Initially funded with $5 million, now valued at approximately $12 million. The color drained from Victoria's face. $12 million? That's impossible. You were a teacher, then worked at a decorating company. Interior design firm, I corrected gently. And yes, those were my occupations. But not my only sources of income. Martin slid documents across the table. The Waypoint Fund was an early-stage venture capital initiative that focused primarily on emerging technologies. Mrs. Thornhill became an investor through her divorce settlement from Henry Williams. Her initial stake has performed exceptionally well. Christopher stared at the papers, recognition slowly dawning. The Waypoint Fund? Dad's pet project from the early days? He always said it was a tax write-off that went nowhere. Your father made many miscalculations, I remarked. That was among his most financially significant. Victoria was rapidly scanning the documents, her training as a corporate attorney enabling her to absorb the implications quickly. This says you're the sole trustee, she said, looking up sharply, with complete discretionary control until the twins reach 25. That's correct. But why haven't you ever mentioned this? Christopher asked, bewilderment evident in his voice. I folded my hands in my lap. There was never a need. The trust was established to ensure Emma and Ethan would have access to the finest educational opportunities. I assumed we all wanted the same thing. What's best for the children? Victoria's eyes narrowed. And now you suddenly feel the need to review the provisions? After we've already begun the application process for Grayson Academy? Grayson is an excellent school, I acknowledged. Very prestigious, very expensive. Fortunately, the trust can easily cover the tuition, provided I approve the disbursement, as appropriate for their educational development. The implication hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Christopher leaned forward. Mom, are you saying you might not approve Grayson? It's the premier preparatory academy in New England. We've been on the waiting list since before they were born. I'm aware of Grayson's reputation, I replied. What I'm less clear about is whether it's the right environment for Emma and Ethan as individuals. For instance, their astronomy program is notably weak, and Emma has shown such interest in the stars. And their approach to physical education emphasizes competitive sports over collaborative play, which might not serve Ethan's more cooperative nature. Victoria's manicured fingers tightened around her leather portfolio. With all due respect, Judith, we've researched every aspect of Grayson's curriculum. Their educational philosophy aligns perfectly with our values and the twins' developmental sum. It's interesting, I mused. And what role does a grandmother's involvement play in that educational philosophy? Christopher shifted uncomfortably. Mom, if this is about our conversation earlier this week, this is about much more than one conversation, Christopher. This is about years of being systematically excluded from meaningful participation in my grandchildren's lives. About being deemed too old, too irrelevant, too much of a liability to contribute to their development. Victoria's professional composure slipped momentarily. That's a gross mischaracterization of... Is it? I interrupted, my voice remaining calm. Let me be perfectly clear. I have no interest in using this trust as leverage or as some form of petty revenge. My only concern, my entire motivation, is ensuring Emma and Ethan have the richest possible childhood, surrounded by people who love them unconditionally and contribute diverse perspectives to their understanding of the world. Martin, who had been observing with professional detachment, cleared his throat. Perhaps I should outline the amendments Mrs. Thornhill has proposed, which would clarify the disbursement conditions. Christopher nodded stiffly, while Victoria's expression remained guarded. The core amendment, Martin explained, establishes a mandatory minimum of meaningful family engagement from all parties for educational funds to be released. This includes regular, substantive interaction between the children and their grandmother, involvement in significant life events, and integration of diverse caregiving approaches. Victoria's posture stiffened further. This sounds like financial extortion to force access. On the contrary, I replied evenly, the trust will continue to fund their education regardless. The amendment simply determines whether it will cover Grayson Academy at $70,000 per child per year, or the similarly excellent Porter School at half that cost, with the difference being held for their university education. Porter doesn't have Grayson's network, Victoria objected immediately. The social connections alone are valuable, certainly, I acknowledged. But are they worth sacrificing the relationship with their only grandmother? That's not a financial question, Victoria. It's a values question. Christopher ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his teenage self that my heart contracted. Mom, if you felt this strongly, why not just talk to us directly instead of this? I tried, Christopher. For 5 years, I've tried. I've accepted last-minute invitations and unexplained cancellations. I've respected boundaries that kept being redrawn further away from meaningful connection. I've watched my grandchildren being raised to view me as an occasional visitor rather than a constant presence in their lives. I leaned forward, holding his gaze. Last week, when you called me too old to care for them properly, something finally clicked. I realized I'd been approaching this all wrong. I've been asking for permission to love my grandchildren when what I should have been doing was asserting my right to be part of their lives on terms that respect my worth and what I have to offer them. Victoria exchanged a glance with Christopher before carefully recalibrating her approach. Judith, no one is questioning your worth. We simply have specific ideas about the twins' upbringing that we'd like to maintain consistency with. Consistency is valuable, I agreed, but so is diversity of experience. Emma and Ethan deserve to know their family heritage, to hear stories about their father's childhood, to learn skills and perspectives that only a grandmother can provide. That's not an extracurricular activity to be scheduled when convenient. It's a fundamental right of childhood. Martin discreetly slid another document forward. The amended trust provides 3 options for educational funding, all of which ensure excellent opportunities for the children. The difference is merely in the allocation of resources and the breadth of experiences included in their development. Christopher studied the paper, his financial training allowing him to quickly grasp the implications. So, either way, their education is covered. This is really about our family dynamics. It always has been, I confirmed softly. Victoria's tactical mind was evidently recalculating. We recognize the importance of family connections, she said, her tone moderated. To conciliatory, perhaps we could establish a more regular visitation schedule, monthly dinners, occasional weekends when our calendar permits. That would be a start, I acknowledged. But what I'm proposing goes deeper. Real integration into their lives. School, events, extracurricular activities, regular caregiving opportunities, vacation time together. A seat at the table when educational decisions are being made, not as the final authority, but as a valued voice with meaningful input. Christopher looked torn between his wife's evident resistance and some deeper recognition stirring within him. Mom, this is a lot to process. We need time to discuss. Of course, I said, gathering my purse. I understand this represents a significant shift in how you've envisioned family dynamics. Take whatever time you need to consider. In the meantime, I added, rising from my chair, I believe you have an appointment at Grayson Academy. Please give the admissions director my regards and explain that a decision on enrollment will be forthcoming after further family consultation. Victoria remained seated, her expression inscrutable. And if we find your terms unacceptable? I paused at the door. Then you'll be making a choice about what you value most for Emma and Ethan. The trust will still provide for their education, just not in the particular manner you've envisioned. The question isn't whether they'll receive excellent schooling. The question is whether that schooling will come with or without the richness of extended family connections. As I walked through the reception area, I heard Christopher call my name. I turned to find him hurrying to catch up, his expression a complex mixture of confusion, frustration, and something that might have been dawning respect. Why didn't you ever tell me about this fund? He asked, His voice lowered. All these years, I thought you were just getting by on the divorce settlement and your work with Eleanor. Would it have changed how you saw me? I countered gently. Or would it simply have changed what you expected from me? He had no immediate answer, and I didn't wait for one. The time for easy answers had long passed. The following days unfolded in unexpected silence. I had anticipated immediate pushback, angry calls, accusations of manipulation, perhaps even threats of legal action. Instead, nothing. The silence felt strategic rather than contemplative, and I prepared myself for whatever countermove Victoria might be orchestrating. On the fourth day, my doorbell rang shortly after dinner. I opened it to find Christopher standing alone on my porch, his expression unreadable. "May I come in?" he asked formally, as if visiting a business associate, rather than his mother. I stepped aside. "Of course." He entered slowly, glancing around the living room as if seeing it for the first time, taking in the bookshelves filled with volumes on astronomy, art history, and natural science. The piano in the corner where I'd been relearning the instrument of my youth. The walls adorned with original artwork I'd collected over the years. "I don't really know you anymore, do I?" he said finally, the question seeming to surprise him as much as me. "Perhaps you never did," I replied gently. "Not as an adult with my own history, dreams, and capabilities. That's not unusual in parent-child relationships. We often freeze our parents in whatever role they played during our formative years." He moved to the window, looking out at the garden I'd been steadily transforming since my arrival. "Victoria's furious," he said after a moment. "She's consulted 3 different attorneys about challenging the trust. They all said the same thing. It's ironclad. It was designed to be. She thinks you planned this all along, some elaborate revenge scheme." I laughed softly. If I were that Machiavellian, I would have revealed the trust's existence 5 years ago. This was never about revenge. Christopher, it's about finally valuing myself enough to insist on being valued by others, especially my family. He turned back to face me. "The twins have been asking about you. Ethan wants to know when they can come back to build another pillow fort. Emma keeps talking about the constellations you taught her." My heart swelled, but I kept my expression neutral. "And what did you tell them?" "That we're figuring out a new family schedule." He sighed heavily, sinking into an armchair. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need the absolute truth. Always. Did Dad know about how valuable your stake in Waypoint became?" I considered my answer carefully. No, not until it was too late to matter. By the time the fund's initial investments began to show significant returns, we were already divorced. Henry's legal team made a critical oversight in not properly valuing or dividing the asset. By the time he realized the magnitude of that mistake, the legal window for amendments had closed. "And you never told him." "He never asked," I said simply. He assumed, as he always did, that I was financially naive and incapable of managing complex investments. Martin proved a much better advisor than your father ever expected. Christopher absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. "And you never told me either." "What would have been the purpose? To impress you? To counter the narrative Victoria's family had constructed about me? Money doesn't determine worth, Christopher. I wanted to be respected for who I am, not what I possess. But now you're using that money as leverage." I shook my head. "No, I'm using it as a reminder of what truly matters. The trust will fund Emma and Ethan's education regardless of what you and Victoria decide. The only question is whether that education will include the full spectrum of family connection or a more limited version of it." He stared at his hands for a long moment. "I keep thinking about something you said at Martin's office, about me calling you too old to properly care for the twins. I've been replaying that conversation in my mind, and I'm ashamed of how it sounds now. It hurt," I acknowledged, quietly. I know. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine directly. The thing is, Mom, it wasn't really about your age. It was about control. Victoria has very specific ideas about how the twins should be raised, and anyone who introduces variables into that equation becomes a threat. I've been so focused on maintaining household peace that I started adopting her perspective without questioning it. That's not uncommon in marriages. Maybe not, but it's not healthy either. He stood, moving restlessly around the room. Last night, I asked Victoria a question that's been bothering me since our meeting with Martin. I asked her why we've been so resistant to having you more involved with the twins, when her own parents have unlimited access despite living much further away. And what was her answer? She said her parents respect their boundaries and follow their rules exactly. He grimaced. But that's not actually true. Beverly constantly overrides our decisions when she thinks we're being too lenient. She brings gifts we've specifically asked her not to. She undermines our authority regularly. But somehow that's acceptable because she does it while outwardly agreeing with Victoria's parenting philosophy. I remained silent, allowing him space to work through his realization. The twins were different after that weekend with you, he continued. More curious, more confident in expressing their own preferences. Victoria saw that as disruption. I'm starting to see it as growth. Children need diverse influences, I offered carefully. Different perspectives help them develop critical thinking and a sense of their own identity separate from any single authority figure. Christopher nodded slowly. I've scheduled a private tour of Porter School for next week, without Victoria. This surprised me. That's a significant step. I need to see it with fresh eyes, not through the lens of prestige or social networking. Potential. He hesitated. I'd like you to come with me. Are you sure that's wise? Victoria might see it as undermining her position. Probably, he acknowledged. But I need to start making some decisions as a father, not just as Victoria's husband. The twins deserve that much from me. As he prepared to leave, Christopher paused at the door. There's something else you should know. Emma and Ethan have been invited to a special astronomy program at the Natural History Museum next Saturday. Victoria has a charity luncheon, and I have a client meeting I've already rescheduled twice. I kept my expression neutral, waiting. They need someone to take them, he continued. Someone who already knows about constellations and planets, someone they trust and enjoy spending time with. I would be honored, I said simply. He nodded. I'll drop them off at 9. The program ends at 2, but maybe they could stay for dinner? If that's not too tiring for you, of course. The subtle acknowledgement of his previous hurtful comments hung between us, along with his awkward attempt at amends. I think I can manage to feed my grandchildren dinner without collapsing from exhaustion, I replied, allowing a small smile to soften the words. After Christopher left, I sat in my garden until darkness fell, watching the familiar stars emerge above me. The conversation represented progress, certainly, but I harbored no illusions about the challenges ahead. Victoria would not relinquish. Control easily, and Christopher's newfound assertiveness would be tested repeatedly in the coming days and weeks. Still, a door had opened, one I'd been knocking on for 5 years. Whatever happened next, I would meet it with the quiet strength I'd been cultivating all my life. Saturday dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for an adventure with my grandchildren. I prepared with perhaps excessive enthusiasm, setting out child-friendly snacks, gathering field guides to the night sky, even arranging a small telescope on the patio for later use. By 8:30, I was watching the clock with the nervous anticipation of a teenager awaiting a first date. At precisely 9, a vehicle I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. It wasn't Christopher's usual sleek sedan, but an unfamiliar SUV with tinted windows. My heart sank as the driver's door opened and Victoria emerged, her expression glacial. She approached my front door with military precision, the twins following behind her like small, uncertain shadows. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "This is a surprise." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Christopher had an emergency client situation. I rearranged my schedule to facilitate today's outing. Her choice of words, facilitate rather than participate, made her position clear. This was a concession, not a reconciliation. Emma broke free from her mother's shadow and rushed forward, wrapping her arms around my legs. "Grandma, I brought my star notebook like you said." Ethan followed more cautiously, glancing at his mother before offering a subdued, "Hi, Grandma." Victoria handed me a sealed envelope. "Their emergency contacts, allergy information, and schedule for today. The astronomy program ends at 2, sharp. I'll collect them at 4, which should allow adequate time for a light snack and brief recreational period." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the envelope without comment on its contents. "We'll have a wonderful time." She knelt to address the twins. "Remember what we discussed. Best behavior, follow all instructions, and no asking for things that aren't on our approved snack list," Ethan recited dutifully. "Exactly." Victoria straightened, smoothing her already impeccable blazer. "I've included the list in your information packet, Judith. Their digestive systems are quite sensitive to processed sugars and artificial ingredients." I resisted the urge to point out that they had consumed chocolate chip pancakes and homemade cookies during their previous visit without any digestive calamities. "I'll keep that in mind." As Victoria turned to leave, Emma called out, "Aren't you coming with us, Mommy?" A flicker of something, regret, uncertainty, crossed Victoria's features. "Not today, sweetheart. Mommy has important meetings, but I'll hear all about the stars when I pick you up." Once her SUV disappeared down the street, the twins' posture visibly relaxed. Ethan's serious expression melted into a hopeful smile. "Can we build another pillow fort after the museum? I've been practicing my architecture." "Absolutely," I promised, ushering them inside. "But first, who wants blueberry muffins? I baked them fresh this morning." Emma's eyes widened. "Are they on the approved snack list?" "They contain fruit," I replied solemnly. "That makes them practically health food." Both children giggled, a small sound of conspiracy and delight that felt like the most precious gift. The astronomy program exceeded all expectations. The museum had transformed its planetarium into an interactive journey through the solar system, with stations where children could touch meteorite fragments, build model rockets, and observe sunspots through specially filtered telescopes. Emma absorbed every detail with intense concentration, filling her notebook with surprisingly accurate sketches and questions for further investigation. Ethan approached the experience more socially, connecting with other children and collaboratively solving the challenges presented at each station. Watching them, I saw not just their individual personalities emerging, but the ghosts of earlier generations. Christopher's methodical curiosity in Emma's focused note-taking, my own sociable nature in Ethan's easy collaboration with strangers. The miraculous continuity of family echoed in their smallest gestures. After the program concluded, we enjoyed lunch at the museum cafe, where I allowed them to choose whatever they wanted from the menu, a novelty they approached with solemn deliberation, followed by an exploration of the dinosaur exhibits that had nothing to do with astronomy but everything to do with childhood wonder. By the time we returned to my townhouse, a comfortable familiarity had developed between us. We constructed an elaborate pillow fort in the living room, complete with fairy lights I'd purchased specifically for this purpose. Inside our fabric castle, I shared stories about Christopher's childhood adventures, carefully edited to present their father in a heroic light, while still humanizing him beyond the stern, busy figure they primarily experienced. "Did Daddy really climb a tree to rescue a baby bird?" Ethan asked, wide-eyed. "He did," I confirmed. He was 7 years old and absolutely determined. The bird had fallen from its nest during a storm, and your father spent an entire afternoon figuring out how to safely return it to its family. But he doesn't even like birds now, Emma observed shrewdly. He wouldn't let me keep the feather. I found at the park. People change as they grow up, I explained gently. Sometimes they forget parts of themselves along the way, but those parts aren't really gone. They're just waiting to be remembered. As 4 o'clock approached, the twins grew increasingly subdued, the shadow of their impending departure dampening the afternoon's magic. I was helping them gather their belongings when the doorbell rang precisely on the hour. To my surprise and evident relief, it was Christopher rather than Victoria who stood on the porch. "Daddy!" Ethan launched himself forward for a hug, while Emma approached more cautiously, assessing her father's mood before deciding physical affection was safe. "Hey, Munchkins!" Christopher greeted them, his voice warmer than I'd heard it in years. "Did you learn all about the stars?" "Grandma showed us how to find the constellations even when they move across the sky," Emma reported earnestly. "And we learned about black holes and neutron stars and how to use a sextant for navigation." "A sextant, huh? That sounds advanced." "It's actually ancient technology," she corrected. "Sailors used them before GPS or even electricity." Christopher raised an eyebrow at me, impressed. "Sounds like you had quite the educational adventure." "We also built a fort," Ethan added proudly, "with lights inside that look like stars. Can you see it before we go?" Christopher checked his watch, then nodded. A quick look. As the twins led their father to inspect their architectural achievement, I noticed subtle changes in Christopher's demeanor. He knelt to enter the fort without concern for his suit pants, listened attentively to their explanations, and asked genuine questions about their construction methods. Small shifts, perhaps, but significant ones. When they emerged, he surprised me by asking, "Mom, would you mind if we stayed for dinner? There's a pizza place around the corner that delivers." The twins erupted in cheers before I could respond. "Pizza isn't on our approved food list," Emma Stage whispered to her brother, excitement making her vibrate slightly. "I won't tell if you won't," Christopher whispered back, with a conspiratorial wink that transported me back decades to his own childhood negotiations around treats and rules. Over dinner, pizza with every topping the twins could agree on, Christopher seemed unusually present, engaging with his children rather than perfunctorily monitoring them. He listened to their museum observations, laughed at their jokes, and even participated when the conversation evolved into an impromptu game of would you rather? As the evening wound down, with Ethan drowsy against his father's shoulder and Emma still chattering about neutron stars, Christopher caught my eye across the table. "Thank you," he said simply. "This was good for all of us." I nodded, understanding the multiple layers of his gratitude. "Anytime." After they departed, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by empty pizza boxes and the pleasant aftermath of family chaos. The day had been a beginning, not a resolution. Victoria's absence spoke volumes about the challenges still ahead, but a genuine beginning nonetheless. My phone chimed with a text message from Christopher. "The twins want to know if Tuesday evening works for stargazing with the telescope. Victoria has yoga until 8. I smiled at the screen. "Tuesday is perfect. I'll have hot chocolate ready." The battle wasn't over, but a meaningful skirmish had been won. Not through confrontation or coercion, but through the simple, powerful alchemy of genuine connection. In allowing Emma and Ethan to experience the joy of unfettered grandparent love, I had opened a door that would prove difficult for anyone to close again, even Victoria with all her carefully constructed rules and boundaries. As I gathered dishes and straightened cushions, I found Emma's star notebook left behind on the coffee table. Flipping through pages of careful observations and questions, I paused at a drawing on the final page, a family portrait showing Christopher, Victoria, the twins, and me, all holding hands beneath a starry sky. Above the drawing, in Emma's careful handwriting, My family under the stars. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I had taken the right path, not for the financial control it gave me, but for the chance to be truly seen by my grandchildren, and perhaps eventually by my son and daughter-in-law as well. The journey ahead would contain both setbacks and victories, but for the first time in years, I felt genuine hope for our family's future. I placed the notebook carefully on my desk to return on Tuesday, already planning which constellations would be most visible for our stargazing adventure. The waxing moon would highlight Perseus and Cassiopeia, ancient stories of family, sacrifice, and redemption written in light across the darkness. Perfect tales to share under the vast, ageless sky that had witnessed countless human dramas unfold. Beneath its patient gaze, Tuesday evening's stargazing marked the beginning of a delicate new rhythm in our family life. Christopher would bring the twins to my house twice weekly, always when Victoria had other commitments, a transparent arrangement we all tacitly accepted. These visits expanded gradually from quick activities to longer stretches that included dinner, homework help, and increasingly elaborate bedtime rituals. Emma and Ethan bloomed under this new arrangement. Their personalities emerged more distinctly with each visit, Emma's intellectual curiosity balanced by unexpected flashes of whimsy, Ethan's gentleness underpinned by quiet determination. Free from Victoria's constant evaluation, they experimented with opinions, preferences, and small rebellions, testing the boundaries of their emerging selves in the safety of my unconditional acceptance. Christopher, too, seemed to rediscover aspects of himself during these visits. He arrived tense and preoccupied, still wearing the armor of corporate ambition, but gradually shed these layers as our evenings progressed. I would catch glimpses of his childhood self, in a spontaneous pillow fight with Ethan, in his willingness to help Emma dissect an owl pellet we'd found in the garden, in his laughter when I recounted embarrassing stories from his youth. Only Victoria remained apart from this unfolding connection. She neither participated in our activities nor directly opposed them, maintaining instead a careful neutrality that felt strategic rather than sincere. When she collected the twins, always precisely at the agreed time, never early or late, her inquiries about their experiences had the clinical tone of a researcher gathering data rather than a mother sharing joy. "Did you complete the astronomy workbook pages?" she would ask. Or, "Was the protein component of dinner adequate?" Never. "Did you have fun?" Or, "What was your favorite part?" The twins, with the adaptive instincts of children navigating complex adult dynamics, developed a dual vocabulary, one for describing their time with me to Victoria, sanitized and educational focused, and another more exuberant version shared with Christopher during the car ride to my house. I pretended not to notice this diplomatic translation service they provided, though it sometimes broke my heart to witness the calculated performance required of them. 3 weeks into our new arrangement, I received an unexpected call from Christopher during business hours. "Mom, are you free for coffee tomorrow morning? There's something important we need to discuss." The formality in his tone triggered an immediate sense of caution. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," he assured me, though his voice suggested otherwise. "Victoria and I have been talking and, well, it's better discussed in person." "The twins are fine," he added quickly, anticipating my next question. "It's about their schooling." We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near his office, neutral territory for whatever conversation lay ahead. That night, I slept poorly, my dreams, populated by faceless authorities in academic robes passing judgment on my fitness as a grandmother. The cafe Christopher had chosen was upscale, but unpretentious, the kind of place where business negotiations unfold over artisanal pastries and precisely prepared coffee. He was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, 2 steaming mugs waiting. "I ordered your usual," he said, rising briefly as I approached. "They didn't have hazelnut syrup, so I got vanilla instead." The fact that he remembered my coffee preference, something so minor yet personal, felt significant. A small bridge across the years of distance between us. Thank you. I settled across from him, noting the portfolio on the table and his excessively starched shirt. Signs of armor donned for difficult conversations. You mentioned the twins' schooling? Christopher nodded, taking a fortifying sip of coffee before responding. Victoria and I have reached a decision about their education next year. I kept my expression neutral. I see. We've decided not to proceed with Grayson Academy. This was unexpected. Grayson had been Victoria's singular focus since the twins' birth, the pinnacle of educational prestige in their social circle, a virtual guarantee of elite university placement down the road. That's a significant change of direction, I observed carefully. May I ask what prompted it? Christopher's fingers drummed lightly against his portfolio. Several factors. The tour of Porter School was illuminating. Their STEM program is actually superior to Grayson's, particularly in areas aligned with Emma's interests. Their collaborative learning approach seems better suited to Ethan's developmental style. And frankly, he added, lowering his voice slightly, after reviewing both financial structures, Porter's tuition model is more transparent and less focused on additional contributions beyond the stated fees. I nodded, understanding the subtext. Grayson's published tuition was merely the entry point. Families were expected to demonstrate their commitment through lavish donations to building funds, scholarship programs, and endowments, a system that rewarded wealth signaling as much as educational values. Porter seems like an excellent choice, I offered. I'm impressed you've given it such thorough consideration. There's more. Christopher opened his portfolio and removed several glossy brochures. Over the following weeks, a fragile new pattern began to emerge in our family dynamics. Tuesday evenings became our regular stargazing nights, with Christopher bringing the twins directly from school. Thursday afternoons were designated for what the children called Grandma's Workshop. Creative projects ranging from watercolor painting to simple woodworking that left them proudly covered in colorful splatters, or sawdust. And every other Saturday belonged entirely to us, from morning pancakes to evening stories. Victoria remained conspicuously absent during these visits. She maintained her distance through a carefully choreographed schedule of professional commitments, fitness classes, and charity obligations that kept her legitimately busy whenever the twins were with me. Christopher never commented on this arrangement, and I respected the delicate balance he was attempting to maintain between his wife's resistance and his children's growing attachment to me. The twins flourished under this new rhythm. Emma's constant questions about the natural world evolved into more structured investigations, complete with hypothesis testing and meticulous documentation in her growing collection of notebooks. Ethan discovered a talent for storytelling, crafting, elaborate narratives for the woodland creatures that visited my garden. Both children seemed to exhale more deeply in my home, their shoulders relaxing as they stepped through the door into a space where exploration was encouraged and mistakes were treated as valuable learning opportunities. One Thursday afternoon, as we completed a particularly ambitious project building birdhouses, I noticed Christopher lingering in the doorway of my workshop. Usually, he used the children's visits as an opportunity to catch up on work emails or phone calls. But today, he had been quietly observing our activities for nearly 20 minutes. Would you like to join us? I offered, gesturing to an empty stool. We're just about to paint. He hesitated, glancing at his watch. I should probably review those quarterly projections before dinner. Daddy, come see my birdhouse, Ethan called, proudly holding up his slightly lopsided creation. I made a special perch for the goldfinches. Something in Christopher's expression softened. He set his phone on the counter and rolled up his sleeves. All right, let me see what you've got here. For the next hour, all four of us painted together, the children giggling as Christopher meticulously created detailed feather patterns while paint somehow migrated from his brush to his forehead and ears. When Emma accidentally knocked over a container of blue paint, sending a puddle spreading across the table, I watched Christopher's instinctive tension, his immediate reach for paper towels, the beginning of a stern comment, transform into unexpected laughter. "Well, now our birds will have a lake to swim in," he remarked, helping Emma create ripples in the spilled paint with the edge of a card. The relief in her expression was palpable, her small shoulders relaxing as she realized a mistake had become an opportunity rather than a transgression. Later that evening, after the twins had gone to bed in the room I'd gradually furnished for their overnight stays, Christopher lingered in my kitchen. He accepted the cup of tea I offered and settled at the counter, watching as I wiped down surfaces and restored order to the creative chaos of our day. "They're different here," he said finally, his voice thoughtful. "Freer somehow." I chose my words carefully. Children respond to the expectations we set. When they sense they're being constantly evaluated, they become cautious, focused on avoiding mistakes rather than exploring possibilities. "Victoria believes in setting high standards," Christopher replied, though his tone lacked conviction. "She wants them to develop discipline and focus." "Those are valuable qualities," I acknowledged, "especially in moderation. But childhood also needs space for wonder, for getting messy, for following curiosity down unexpected paths." He sipped his tea, his expression distant. "I had that kind of childhood, didn't I? I'd forgotten until watching you with them today. The science experiments in the backyard, the elaborate forts, the freedom to just be." "You were a wonderfully curious child," I confirmed softly, always asking why, always wanting to understand how things worked. "When did I stop?" The question hung between us, more vulnerable than anything he'd shared in years. I considered my response carefully. Perhaps when the stakes felt too high for exploration, when certainty seemed safer than curiosity. Christopher nodded slowly. "Victoria's family has a saying, 'Excellence isn't achieved through experimentation.' Her father says it at least once at every family gathering. And yet every significant scientific breakthrough, every artistic masterpiece, every technological innovation began with someone willing to experiment, to risk failure in pursuit of discovery," I countered gently. He traced the rim of his mug with one finger. "The twins were asking about Thanksgiving plans today. They want to know if you'll be with us this year." The change of subject wasn't as abrupt as it seemed. Holidays had always been carefully controlled, territory in their household, with Victoria's family traditions taking precedence and my invitations consistently limited to brief, ceremonial appearances. "What did you tell them?" "That we'd need to discuss it as a family." Christopher met my gaze directly. "But I'd like you there, Mom. Not just for dessert after the main event, but for the whole day. The cooking, the chaos, all of it." I kept my expression neutral despite the surge of emotion his words triggered. "Victoria might have other thoughts on the matter." "Probably," he acknowledged with a wry smile. "But it's time for some new family traditions. Time for the twins to experience holidays that aren't orchestrated like corporate events." The implied criticism of Victoria's approach wasn't lost on me, but I refrained from reinforcing it. Whatever reconciliation was occurring between my son and me didn't need to come at the expense of his marriage. "I'd be honored to join you," I said simply. "Just let me know what I can contribute." As Christopher gathered the sleeping twins to take them home, he paused at the door. "Thank you, Mom. Not just for today, but for—" He gestured vaguely, seemingly at a loss for words. "For remembering what childhood should be," I suggested. He nodded, grateful for the articulation. "Exactly that." After they left, I sat, in my garden under the October stars, reflecting on the subtle shifts occurring in our family. The trust I had used as leverage had opened a door, certainly, but what was building now went beyond financial considerations or educational decisions. Something essential was being recovered, not just my relationship with my grandchildren, but Christopher's connection to his own authentic self, long buried under layers of ambition and accommodation. The following Tuesday brought unexpected rain, canceling our planned stargazing. Christopher called mid-afternoon, his voice tight with stress. "Mom, I hate to ask this, but could you possibly pick the twins up from school today? Victoria's stuck in court, and I have an emergency client meeting I can't reschedule. Their after-school program ends at 4. "Of course," I replied, already, reaching for my keys. "Text me any details I need for pickup. You'll need identification and to be on the approved pickup list." He paused. "Actually, you're not on the list. Let me call the school and add you immediately." The significance of this wasn't lost on me. Being added to the school's official pickup list represented a level of trust and integration into their daily lives that Victoria had previously resisted. Whether Christopher had consulted her about this decision remained unclear, but his willingness to authorize it himself marked an important evolution in our family dynamics. Porter Elementary occupied a handsome brick building surrounded by ancient oak trees, just beginning to display their autumn colors. I arrived early, parking in the visitor section and approaching the main entrance with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The security measures were thorough: ID verification, cross-checking against the approved pickup list, even a brief call to Christopher confirming the arrangement. But eventually, I was directed to wait in the lobby where children were released to their caregivers. As I settled onto a bench, I noticed a familiar figure striding purposefully through the doors. Victoria, immaculate in a charcoal suit despite the rainy day, her expression shifting from harried determination to shocked displeasure as she spotted me. "Judith, what are you doing here?" The question carried a distinct note of territorial challenge. "Christopher asked me to collect the twins," I explained calmly. "He mentioned you were in court." My case settled early. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I could have picked them up. He didn't need to involve you." Before I could respond, the doors to the classroom area opened, releasing a stream of excited children. Emma spotted me first, her face lighting up with surprised delight. "Grandma!" She broke away from the line, rushing toward me with uncharacteristic abandon. "Why are you here? Is it a special occasion? Are we going to your house?" Ethan followed more cautiously, his expression brightening when he saw me but immediately clouding when he registered his mother's presence and tense posture. "Hello, darling," Victoria greeted them, smoothing Emma's hair with an automatic gesture. "There's been a change of plans. I finished work early, so I'll be taking you home now." Emma's disappointment was immediate and unfiltered. "But I wanted to go to Grandma's house. We were going to finish our rain collection system since we can't do stargazing." Victoria's smile tightened. "We can do something fun at home instead. Perhaps that new educational app I downloaded about weather patterns?" Ethan, ever the diplomat, glanced between his mother and me. "Maybe Grandma could come to our house?" he suggested tentatively. "She could help us with the rain collection system in our backyard." The proposal hung in the air between us, a child's innocent suggestion that inadvertently highlighted the artificial separation Victoria had maintained between our living spaces. In the months since our confrontation in Martin's office, I had never once been invited to their home. Victoria hesitated, clearly calculating the social implications of publicly refusing such a reasonable request in front of school staff and other parents. "I suppose that could work," she conceded finally. "If Judith doesn't have other commitments." "My schedule is entirely clear," I replied evenly. And so began one of the most awkward afternoons of my life. Following Victoria's luxury SUV to their elegant colonial home, I was acutely aware of crossing a threshold that had been implicitly forbidden. The house itself revealed much about their daily life, impeccably designed but with a sterility that spoke of appearance prioritized over comfortable living. Family photos adorned the walls, professionally styled and color-coordinated. Educational toys were arranged in tasteful baskets, while evidence of actual play remained conspicuously absent. Victoria maintained rigorous control over the afternoons. Activities, directing the twins to change immediately from their school clothes into designated outdoor play attire, before allowing them into the backyard with me. She hovered nearby as we assembled the rain collection system, offering unnecessary warnings about mud and commenting repeatedly on the impending evening schedule. "We don't want to disrupt their homework routine," she reminded me for the third time. Consistency is critical for academic development. The twins, accustomed to navigating their mother's expectations, maintained a subdued version of their usual enthusiasm, checking Victoria's expression frequently before expressing excitement or asking questions. It was a painful contrast to their uninhibited joy in my home, and I found myself wondering how Christopher could fail to notice the difference. My answer came shortly after 5, when he arrived home earlier than expected. The moment he stepped into the backyard, I witnessed an immediate shift in the family dynamics. Victoria's posture straightened, her expression warming into something more genuinely animated. The twins, too, seemed to relax slightly in their father's presence, as if his arrival diluted the concentrated intensity of Victoria's attention. "What's all this?" Christopher asked, surveying our nearly completed rain barrel system with apparent interest. "Grandma helped us build it," Ethan explained proudly. "Now we can measure precipitation rates and calculate monthly averages." "And use the water for the garden," Emma added. "It's eco-friendly conservation." Christopher knelt to examine their work more closely. "This is fantastic, guys. Really impressive engineering." Victoria touched his shoulder lightly. "We've adjusted the evening schedule to accommodate this project. I thought perhaps you could supervise homework while I prepare dinner." "Actually," Christopher replied, rising to his feet, "I was thinking we might order pizza tonight. Give everyone a break from routine." The suggestion landed like a small explosion in their carefully ordered world. Victoria's expression flickered between disbelief and displeasure, while the twins exchanged wide-eyed glances of hopeful disbelief. "Pizza?" Victoria echoed, as if confirming she'd heard correctly. "On a Tuesday? Why not?" Christopher shrugged casually, though I detected a deliberate nonchalance in his tone. "We've all had a long day. The kids have been doing great in school. I think we've earned a little celebration." "With pepperoni?" Ethan asked tentatively. "And extra cheese?" Emma added, barely containing her excitement. Christopher grinned. "Absolutely. Why don't you two go wash up while I place the order?" As the twins raced inside, he turned to me. "You'll stay for dinner, Mom? I'd like to hear more about this rain collection project." I glanced at Victoria, whose tight smile couldn't quite disguise her displeasure. "I wouldn't want to impose on your family evening." "Nonsense," Christopher insisted, with a firmness I hadn't heard from him in years. "Your family, too. Besides, I'm ordering way too much pizza for just the 4 of us." Victoria excused herself to reconfigure tomorrow's meal plan, leaving Christopher and me alone in the backyard. Once she was out of earshot, he sighed heavily. "Sorry about the reception committee. I should have called her when plans changed." "It's understandable," I offered diplomatically. "Changes to established routines can be challenging." Christopher's expression turned thoughtful. "That's one way of putting it." He gestured toward the house. "Come inside, Mom. I want to show you something." He led me not to the formal living room where I imagined guests were typically entertained, but to his home office, a surprisingly comfortable space with walls lined with books and family photographs that appeared more spontaneous than those displayed in the public areas of the home. "I've been doing some thinking," he began, closing the door partially for privacy. "About the twins' education, about our family dynamics, about the kinds of experiences I want them to have growing up." He removed a folder from his desk drawer and handed it to me. Inside were brochures for Porter School, the less prestigious but pedagogically superior alternative to Grayson Academy, along with information about various enrichment programs focused on astronomy, environmental science, and creative arts. Victoria and I have been negotiating, he explained carefully. She's agreed to consider Porter instead of Grayson, provided we supplement with additional academic enrichment. I'm pushing for programs that allow more exploration and creativity, while she's advocating for more structured academic acceleration. I reviewed the materials, noting the thoughtful consideration evident in the selections. These all look excellent. What prompted this reconsideration of Grayson? Christopher rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture from childhood that emerged when he was working through difficult thoughts. Watching the twins with you, he admitted, seeing how they light up when learning is connected to curiosity rather than achievement, remembering how it felt to learn that way myself. He moved to his bookshelf, pulling down a worn astronomy guide I recognized immediately, a gift from his 10th birthday, filled with his childish notes and drawings of constellations. I found this while looking for resources for Emma, he explained, turning the pages carefully. It brought back so many memories. Nights in the backyard with my telescope, your endless patience explaining celestial mechanics, the wonder of it all. I want that for them too, Mom. Not just the facts and the academic advantages, but the joy of discovery. The simple statement contained multitudes, an acknowledgement of the value in my approach to education and childhood, a recognition of what had been missing in the twins' heavily structured lives, perhaps even a subtle critique of the prioritization of prestige over authentic learning. They deserve that joy, I agreed softly. All children do. Christopher closed the book carefully. Victoria sees education primarily as preparation for future success. Competitive advantage, resume building. And you? He considered the question seriously. I'm starting to see it differently, as awakening curiosity that will serve them throughout life, regardless of their eventual career paths. That's quite a philosophical shift, I observed. It's causing some tension, he acknowledged with a wry smile. Victoria thinks I'm having some kind of midlife crisis of educational principles. Maybe I am, but I can't unsee what I've witnessed at your house, how learning can be joyful rather than just strategic. The door pushed open wider as Emma peeked in. Daddy, can we show Grandma our science fair projects before pizza comes? Christopher's expression softened immediately. Great idea, sweetheart. Lead the way. The twins' bedrooms revealed another layer of their carefully managed existence. While beautifully appointed with high-quality furniture and educational toys, they lacked the personal touches and creative chaos typical of children's spaces. No artwork taped haphazardly to walls, no collections of treasured objects displayed, according to childish rather than decorative logic. Even their science fair projects, impressively sophisticated for 5-year-olds, bore the unmistakable signs of adult direction and intervention. As the twins proudly explained their projects, Emma's comparison of various plant-growing mediums, Ethan's analysis of local bird species and their preferred foods, I noted how they referenced Victoria's guidance and standards repeatedly. Mommy helped me create a proper data table. Mommy showed me how to make my presentation board look professional. Their accomplishments were genuine, but the underlying message was clear. Excellence required adherence to adult-defined parameters. The arrival of pizza created a temporary suspension of the household's usual order. Victoria emerged from the kitchen with proper plates and utensils, looking mildly scandalized when Christopher suggested eating directly from the box while sitting on the family room floor. Like a picnic, he explained to the delighted twins. To my surprise, Victoria didn't object beyond a resigned sigh. She even joined us on the floor, though she maintained her impeccable posture and used her plate and cutlery, while the rest of us embraced the casual approach. The twins, initially cautious in this unexpected departure from routine, gradually relaxed into giggles and animated conversation. "Remember when we made that giant volcano at Grandma's house?" Ethan asked, reaching for another slice. "And the lava exploded all the way to the ceiling?" Emma laughed. "Grandma didn't even get mad. She just said we discovered an important principle about chemical reactions. And then we measured how far the splatter reached," I added, smiling at the memory. "Created quite an impressive data. Visualization with that graph." Victoria's expression remained neutral, but I noticed her studying her children with a slightly different gaze, perhaps seeing for the first time how animated they became when recounting experiences of learning, through joyful chaos rather than careful structure. After dinner, as Christopher walked me to my car, he spoke quietly. "Thanks for navigating that situation gracefully. I know it wasn't easy." "Family rarely is," I replied, "but worth every complicated moment." He nodded thoughtfully. Next. "Tuesday, we're back to our regular schedule at your house, rain or stars. But maybe we could make this a monthly thing too. Dinner here. All of us together." The suggestion represented a significant evolution, integrating our previously separate family interactions into a more cohesive whole, bringing me into their space rather than keeping our relationships compartmentalized. "I'd like that," I said simply, "if Victoria's comfortable with the arrangement." "She's adjusting," Christopher replied diplomatically. "Change doesn't come easily to her. Structure and control are how she manages anxiety, especially around parenting. Her own childhood was." He paused, seeming to consider how much to share. "Let's just say her parents' approach to excellence came with significant emotional costs. She's trying to give the twins the advantages without the damage, but sometimes the patterns repeat despite our best intentions." This glimpse into Victoria's motivations offered a new perspective on her rigid approach to parenting. Perhaps her controlling tendencies stemmed not from simple perfectionism, but from deeper wounds and genuine concern for her children's well-being, however misapplied. In execution, understanding where our parenting instincts originate is half the battle, I offered. The rest is having the courage to choose different patterns when necessary. Christopher nodded, his expression suggesting this was territory he'd been contemplating. Deeply. "I've been thinking a lot about patterns lately. The ones I want to continue, the ones I need to break." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the unexpected developments of the day. What had begun as a simple rain-prompted change of plans had evolved into a significant breakthrough, my first entry into their home, a family dinner together, and most importantly, evidence that Christopher was actively reevaluating the educational and parenting approaches that had previously been Victoria's unchallenged domain. The trust fund had opened the door for these changes, certainly, but what was emerging went far beyond financial leverage or educational decisions. Something more fundamental was shifting in our family system, a rebalancing of voices, a reclamation of values. A gentle but persistent questioning of assumptions that had gone unchallenged for too long. When I arrived home, I found an email from Martin Hayes waiting in my inbox. The quarterly report on the Educational Trust showed excellent performance, with assets now approaching $13 million. But it was Martin's personal note at the end that caught my attention. "Judith, I've been meaning to ask, have you given any consideration to the broader estate planning we discussed? The Educational Trust is well established, but there may be additional opportunities to create meaningful legacies beyond the twins' schooling. Perhaps we should schedule a conversation about the family foundation concept we discussed previously. At the current growth rate, the Waypoint Fund could support significant philanthropic initiatives while still securing the children's educational future." I closed my laptop, moving to the window to observe the rain that had prevented our stargazing, but created an even more valuable opportunity for family connection. The foundation concept Martin referenced had been merely theoretical when we'd discussed it months ago. a possible vehicle for extending the impact of my unexpected wealth beyond my immediate family. Now, however, the idea resonated differently, not as a distant possibility, but as a natural extension of the transformation already underway. A family foundation would require collaboration, shared decision-making, unified purpose, all elements currently evolving in our fragile new family dynamic. It would offer the twins exposure to concepts of social responsibility and purposeful giving alongside their academic development. And perhaps most significantly, it would provide a framework for Christopher and Victoria to engage with me as an equal partner rather than as an aging parent whose role was diminishing rather than expanding with time. I opened a new document on my laptop and began typing notes for my next meeting with Martin. The Educational Trust had been just the beginning, a necessary catalyst for change, but ultimately a limited vehicle for the deeper family healing and connection I now dared to envision. The foundation concept offered something more comprehensive, a shared legacy that could unite 3 generations around values of learning, growth, and community contribution. As I worked, the rain intensified, drumming steadily against the windows. Tomorrow, the twins' collection barrels would be full, ready for measurement and observation. A simple lesson in natural resources transformed into a doorway for deeper connection. That pattern, finding profound meaning and relationship through seemingly ordinary moments, was exactly what I hoped to nurture in our evolving family story. The path ahead would undoubtedly contain challenges. Victoria's resistance might soften, but would likely never disappear entirely. Christopher's awakening to alternative approaches would face ongoing tests against ingrained habits and social expectations. The twins would continue navigating the complex waters of divided loyalties and differing adult perspectives. But tonight, for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future where these challenges represented growing pains rather than permanent limitations, where my golden years might be truly golden, not because of financial security, but because of rich, meaningful connection with the people I loved most in the world. The week before Thanksgiving arrived with unseasonable snow, blanketing Boston in a premature winter that seemed to catch everyone by surprise except Emma, who proudly informed me she had predicted the weather pattern based on her barometric pressure readings. Our Tuesday evening stargazing had transformed into hot chocolate and constellation mapping from my living room window. The twins snuggled beneath blankets as they identified stellar patterns through the gently falling flakes. Christopher had confirmed our holiday plans. I would join them for the entire day, participating in meal preparation rather than arriving as an afterthought for dessert. It represented a significant departure from previous years, when Victoria's parents dominated the celebration with their particular brand of performative family tradition. Beverly and Lawrence would still be present, Christopher explained, but the dynamic would be different this year. "We're establishing our own traditions," he'd said firmly, in a tone that suggested this decision had not come without conflict. The depth of that conflict became apparent the Sunday before Thanksgiving, when my doorbell rang unexpectedly in the late afternoon. I opened it to find Victoria standing alone on my porch, her expression composed but determined. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, her formal tone at odds with the unannounced visit. "I was hoping we might speak privately." I invited her in, noting how her gaze cataloged the details of my home, the children's artwork prominently displayed, the half-completed science projects on the dining table, the comfortable disarray of books and learning materials that marked our regular activities. "The twins speak of nothing but their time here," she remarked, declining my offer of tea with a slight shake of her head. "One would think this townhouse contained magical properties, given their enthusiasm." "No magic," I replied evenly. "Just different experiences from their usual routine." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Different indeed. Christopher tells me you'll be joining us for the entire Thanksgiving celebration this year." "That's my understanding. I'm looking forward to it." She nodded, moving to the window to observe the continued snowfall. My parents are flying in tomorrow evening. They're quite accustomed to our usual holiday arrangements. Change is challenging for them. I recognized the statement for what it was. Not merely an observation, but a prelude to negotiation. Most people find comfort in familiar traditions, I acknowledged neutrally. Victoria turned to face me directly. Let me be straightforward, Judith. I've respected the changes Christopher has implemented regarding your involvement with the children. I've adjusted to the twice-weekly visits, the occasional sleepovers, even the educational decisions that diverge from our original plans. But Thanksgiving in our home has always been my domain. My family's traditions, my mother's recipes, my particular way of creating meaningful holiday memories for the twins. I listened attentively, allowing her the space to fully express her position. I'm not asking you to withdraw entirely, she continued, her voice maintaining its carefully modulated tone, but perhaps we could compromise. You could join us for the morning preparation, then allow my parents their traditional role during the formal meal. You could return for dessert and evening activities, creating a balance that respects everyone's expectations. The proposal was reasonable on its surface, a diplomatic attempt to accommodate all parties while preserving Victoria's sense of control over her most cherished family occasion. Yet beneath the rational suggestion lay the same fundamental issue that had characterized our relationship from the beginning: the perception of my presence as an intrusion rather than an enhancement, something to be managed rather than embraced. I appreciate your directness, I replied after a thoughtful pause. And I understand the importance of traditions, especially around holidays. But I think we both recognize that this conversation isn't really about scheduling or traditions. Victoria's eyebrow lifted slightly. No? It's about whether my role in this family is conditional or integral, whether I'm a guest to be accommodated or a grandmother with a rightful place at the table. Her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. You've certainly leveraged your way to that table quite effectively. The reference to the educational trust hung between us, unspoken but unmistakable. That's a common misconception, I said gently. The trust simply opened a door that should never have been closed in the first place. What's happening now, the relationships forming, the connections deepening, isn't about financial leverage. It's about giving Emma and Ethan the opportunity to know their grandmother, and perhaps more importantly, to experience learning and family in a different way than they might otherwise. Victoria's expression remained carefully neutral, but I detected a slight tension around her mouth. A different way that implicitly criticizes the approach Christopher and I have chosen. Different doesn't mean critical, I countered. It means complementary. Children benefit from diverse influences and perspectives, especially from people who love them unconditionally. And you believe my love comes with conditions? A rare flash of genuine emotion broke through her composed exterior. I believe your love is expressed through high expectations and carefully managed experiences, I replied honestly. There's tremendous value in that approach. But there's equal value in allowing children space for unstructured discovery, for making messes both literal and figurative, for learning through play and exploration. Both approaches contribute to well-rounded development. Victoria moved back to the window, her reflection in the glass revealing more vulnerability than she likely intended. My parents believed excellence required perfect performance at all times. Mistakes were inexcusable. Emotions were inefficient, and anything less than exceptional achievement represented personal failure. She paused, gathering herself. I've worked very hard to create different standards for Emma and Ethan. The unexpected glimpse into her childhood explained much about her parenting philosophy, not merely an attachment to social advantage, but a genuine attempt to improve upon her own upbringing while retaining what she perceived as its benefits. I can see that, I acknowledged, and they're fortunate to have a mother so dedicated to their success and well-being. She turned back to face me. Then you understand why maintaining certain standards and traditions matters so deeply to me. I do. But I also understand the cost of those standards when they become barriers to authentic connection. Your parents will be present for many Thanksgivings to come. They'll have abundant opportunities to share their traditions and values with the twins. But I'm 63 years old, Victoria. The time I have to build meaningful relationships with my grandchildren is finite and precious. The simple truth of mortality hung in the air between us, not as manipulation, but as undeniable reality. Victoria studied me with a thoughtfulness I hadn't previously witnessed from her. You truly believe your presence adds something essential to their lives, don't you? I know it does, I replied without hesitation. Just as I know your presence does, just as your parents' influence does in its own way. Children thrive when surrounded by diverse expressions of love, even when those expressions sometimes appear contradictory. She considered this, her analytical mind visibly processing the concept. A portfolio approach to family influence, she mused, falling back on financial terminology in a way that nearly made me smile. Diversification of developmental inputs. Precisely. We each contribute different strengths to their growth. The whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Victoria nodded slowly, reaching a decision. Very well. You'll join us for the entire day, as Christopher arranged. But I would appreciate your support in managing my parents' expectations and potential discomfort with the changed arrangements. Of course, I agreed readily. I have no desire to disrupt their relationship with the twins or to create unnecessary tension. As Victoria prepared to leave, she paused at the door. There's one more thing you should know. My mother has been investigating you. This didn't particularly surprise me. Beverly's controlling tendencies and suspicion of outsiders were well established. I assumed as much. She's discovered some information about the Waypoint Fund and your involvement with it. She believes there's something improper about your financial situation and has engaged a private financial investigator to look into the matter further. The revelation was delivered without emotion, merely as factual information I should possess. Yet the subtext was clear. Victoria was warning me, an unexpected act of quasi-alliance that represented a significant shift in our dynamic. Thank you for telling me, I said. There's nothing improper to discover, but I appreciate the heads up nonetheless. Victoria nodded briskly. My mother can be tenacious when she believes she's protecting family interests. I thought you should be prepared. With that cryptic warning, she departed, leaving me contemplating the complex implications of our conversation. The immediate concern of Thanksgiving arrangements had been resolved, but Beverly's investigation introduced a new complication. While I had nothing to hide regarding the Waypoint Fund or my financial situation, I harbored no illusions about Beverly's motivations or her willingness to create discord if it served her purposes. I called Martin Hayes immediately, explaining the situation and requesting a thorough review of all documentation related to the Waypoint Fund and the Educational Trust. I want to ensure everything is not just legally sound, but transparent and beyond reproach, I explained. If Beverly is determined to find impropriety, I'd prefer to have comprehensive documentation readily available to address any accusations directly. Martin's response was reassuringly confident. The fund's structure and your ownership stake are completely legitimate, Judith. The oversight in your divorce settlement was administrative, not illegal. Henry's legal team simply failed to properly account for an asset they deemed worthless at the time. There's nothing anyone can discover that would undermine your position or the validity of the educational trust. Nevertheless, he promised to prepare a complete dossier documenting the fund's history, my legal acquisition of the ownership stake, and the proper establishment of the educational trust. If confrontation occurs, he advised, direct factual evidence will be your best defense. Armed with this reassurance, I turned my attention to Thanksgiving preparations, choosing recipes the twins had particularly enjoyed during our cooking adventures and gathering small, thoughtful gifts for everyone, including Beverly and Lawrence. Whatever tension might emerge during the holiday, I was determined to model the gracious family inclusion I hoped would eventually characterize our relationships. Thanksgiving Day dawned bright and cold, the early snow having melted just enough to create that particular New England winter luminosity that transforms ordinary landscapes into Currier and Ives prints. I arrived at Christopher and Victoria's, home at 9, bearing multiple canvas bags of ingredients and modest gifts. Christopher opened the door, the sounds of children's excitement emanating from within. "Mom, perfect timing. The troops are getting restless and Victoria could use reinforcement in the kitchen." Thanksgiving morning arrived with perfect clarity, sunlight streaming through frost-touched windows as I prepared for what would undoubtedly be a pivotal day in our family's evolution. I arrived at Christopher and Victoria's elegant colonial precisely at 9, arms laden with ingredients and modest gifts, heart fortified with Martin's reassurances about the impeccable legality of my financial arrangements. Christopher greeted me at the door, the chaotic sounds of holiday preparation spilling out behind him. "Mom, thank goodness. We're approaching crisis level in the kitchen." The home's atmosphere had subtly transformed since my first visit. Children's artwork now adorned the refrigerator, small collections of autumn treasures decorated tables, and a general softening of the showroom perfection suggested life was being genuinely lived rather than merely displayed. Victoria stood at the kitchen island, flour dusting her cheek, consulting a tablet propped in a cookbook stand. The twins darted around her, alternately helping and creating minor disasters that she tolerated with surprising grace. "Grandma's here," Emma announced, abandoning her cranberry sorting to rush toward me. "Did you bring the special spices for the stuffing?" Ethan added eagerly. Victoria looked up, her expression communicating complex emotions, relief at reinforcement, wariness about territory, determination to maintain control. "Judith, good morning. We're attempting new traditions this year, with mixed results." Over the next hours, we established an unexpectedly functional rhythm. Victoria maintained executive control of the turkey and sacred family recipes, while I supervised the twins in preparing side dishes and setting the dining table. Christopher moved between kitchen and living room, managing football viewing and occasional interventions when cooking debates threatened to escalate. By noon, the house had filled with enticing aromas and the warm sounds of family cooperation. The doorbell announced Beverly and Lawrence's arrival, triggering an immediate transformation in the kitchen atmosphere. Victoria straightened, checking, her appearance with the automatic response of someone conditioned to inspection. The twins likewise snapped to attention, abandoning their creative vegetable arrangement for more formal postures. "Remember," Victoria murmured to them, "grandmother and grandfather appreciate proper holiday decorum." Beverly's assessment was immediate and comprehensive, her gaze sweeping from my casual yet elegant attire to evidence of my culinary contributions. "Judith," she acknowledged with practiced cordiality, "what a surprise to see you so integrated into Victoria's kitchen." The emphasis transformed her observation into implicit criticism of boundary violations. Lawrence nodded curtly in my direction before focusing on the twins, who stepped forward with rehearsed precision to deliver formal holiday wishes. "Victoria, darling," Beverly continued, producing an elegant container from her designer tote. "I brought my special cranberry compote. I assumed you'd want me to contribute directly." She either deliberately ignored or failed to notice the cranberry sauce Emma and I had just finished preparing. Victoria's expression flickered momentarily before resetting to polite appreciation. "How thoughtful, Mother. The twins actually prepared cranberry sauce with Judith earlier, but we can certainly serve both. Different flavor profiles offer interesting contrasts." Beverly's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I wasn't aware the children were permitted to cook. The risk of contamination and improper technique is considerable at their age." Actually, I interjected mildly, cooking provides excellent practical applications for the scientific principles they're learning. Measurement, chemical reactions, sensory evaluation, all valuable educational opportunities. As the afternoon progressed, the underlying currents of control and competing influence became increasingly evident. Beverly found subtle ways to reassert her authority, rearranging table settings, questioning cooking techniques, making pointed references to proper educational approaches. I maintained steady pleasantness, choosing engagement over confrontation, focusing on the twins' experience rather than adult power dynamics. When we gathered around the formal dining table, Lawrence cleared his throat meaningfully. Before we begin, a few words about family tradition and values seem appropriate. He straightened in his chair, assuming a posture of authority that suggested years of boardroom dominance. Thanksgiving reminds us of the importance of excellence and achievement. The early settlers survived through rigorous discipline and unwavering standards. This family continues that tradition in Victoria's distinguished legal career, in Christopher's financial acumen, and in the exceptional educational trajectory established for Emma and Ethan. He raised his glass in formal toast to the continuity of achievement across generations. The adults dutifully raised their glasses, though I noticed Christopher's slightly delayed response and Victoria's fixed smile. The twins, sensing the performative nature of the moment, mimicked the gesture with exaggerated formality. As plates were filled and conversation shifted to general topics, Beverly directed her attention toward me with focused intensity. Judith, Victoria mentioned you've established quite a substantial educational trust for the twins. Remarkably generous, especially given your professional background. The deliberate pause communicated volumes about her assessment of my teaching career and design firm work. Lawrence's attention sharpened, his eyes narrowing with predatory interest. The children's education is important to me, I replied simply. I'm fortunate to be in a position to contribute to their future opportunities. Beverly's smile remained, unchanged, though her eyes hardened slightly. Indeed. Lawrence and I were quite surprised to learn about your financial resources. The Waypoint Fund, I understand. A most interesting investment vehicle. Christopher's head snapped up, his expression shifting from social politeness to alert concern. Mother, perhaps this is an appropriate dinner conversation. On the contrary, Lawrence interjected, setting down his fork with precision. Financial transparency is essential in family matters, particularly regarding educational planning. The twins, sensing tension but not understanding its source, became unnaturally still, their enjoyment visibly diminishing under the weight of unspoken conflict. The educational trust is properly established and fully documented, I said evenly. My financial advisor would be happy to address any specific questions about its structure. Beverly leaned forward slightly. Our concern isn't about the trust itself, but rather the funding source. The Waypoint Fund was Henry's initiative, yet somehow you emerged from your divorce with control of this particular asset. Most unusual. The implication hung in the air. Financial impropriety, perhaps even fraudulent acquisition. I maintained composure, aware of the twins' attentive presence and the holiday occasion. The asset allocation during my divorce was handled by qualified legal teams, I explained calmly. The oversight regarding the Waypoint Fund's potential was an administrative error on Henry's team's part, not impropriety on mine. Lawrence made a skeptical sound. Administrative error resulting in an 8-figure windfall? Quite convenient. Dad, Christopher interrupted firmly, I've reviewed the documentation myself. Everything is completely legitimate. The fund was considered essentially worthless at divorce. Its subsequent performance was unpredictable and unrelated to Mom's actions. Beverly's expression suggested she remained unconvinced. Nevertheless, The circumstances are highly irregular. One might question whether Henry might have legal recourse to contest the current arrangement. The threat, thinly veiled but unmistakable, crystallized her strategy. Beverly wasn't merely investigating out of curiosity. She was actively seeking leverage to diminish my influence with the twins. Before I could respond, Emma's small voice cut through the tension. "Why are you being mean to Grandma Judith?" The directness of a child's perception silenced the table. Beverly recovered first, patting Emma's hand with condescending affection. "This is adult conversation, darling. Sometimes grown-ups discuss complicated matters to protect family interests." "But Grandma Judith is family," Ethan said, his confusion evident. "And you're saying she did something wrong with money?" Victoria intervened, her tone gentle but firm. "That's enough discussion of financial matters. Let's focus on enjoying our meal and being thankful for having everyone together." The meal proceeded with artificial pleasantness, while underlying tensions remained unresolved. When dessert concluded, Christopher suggested the twins show me their backyard fort, providing welcome escape from the dining room's strained atmosphere. In the crisp air, with twilight gathering around bare trees, the twins eagerly led me to their creation, a surprisingly sophisticated structure of branches, canvas, and repurposed lumber. "Grandma, why were grandmother and grandfather asking about your money?" Emma asked directly. "Is something wrong?" "Sometimes adults have different ideas about how families should work together," I explained, settling onto a garden bench as they crowded close. "Your grandmother and grandfather Williams have their perspective on what's best for you, just as your parents do, and as I do. Those perspectives don't always align perfectly." "They don't like that you have money for our school," Ethan observed, with surprising insight. "But why? Isn't that a good thing?" "They worry about how different influences might affect your development," I said carefully. "All the adults who love you want what's best. We sometimes disagree about what best looks like." Emma considered this thoughtfully. "Like how grandmother thinks we should focus on academic competitions, but you think we should explore things that interest us naturally?" "Exactly. Different approaches to learning and growing." Ethan leaned against my side. "I like your way better. When we're with you, learning feels more like adventure and less like work." "Both approaches have value," I reminded them gently. "Structure and discipline help build important skills. Exploration and creativity develop different but equally important abilities. Ideally, you'll benefit from both influences." Victoria appeared at the back door, her expression troubled. "Children, time to come in. Grandmother and grandfather are preparing to leave." As the twins ran ahead, Victoria lingered. "My parents have suggested a family meeting tomorrow morning to discuss the educational trust, without the children present." "I see. And you think that's necessary?" She sighed, weariness evident beneath her composed exterior. "They won't let this go. Better to address it directly than allow it to fester." "I'll be there. Should I bring Martin?" "That might further antagonize them," she admitted. "Perhaps have him available by phone if specific documentation becomes necessary." This suggestion, practical and measured, represented an unexpected alliance. Victoria wasn't automatically siding with her parents against me. "Thank you for the warning," I said sincerely, "and for creating space for more balanced relationships in the children's lives. I know it hasn't been easy navigating between competing loyalties." Something flickered in Victoria's expression, recognition of the emotional complexity she was managing. The twins are flourishing with this new arrangement. Their teachers have noted increased confidence, greater intellectual curiosity, more willingness to take creative risks. I can't ignore those positive outcomes, regardless of how they've come about. This acknowledgement, however reluctant, confirmed what I'd observed in the children's development. The diversification of influence was yielding measurable benefits. The meeting the following morning proved less confrontational than anticipated. Beverly and Lawrence arrived armed with financial questions and implied legal threats, but their position weakened considerably when Victoria unexpectedly shared how her own childhood under their rigid educational philosophy had created achievement at significant personal cost. The vulnerability of this admission shifted the conversation from control to collaboration, from competing authorities to complementary contributions. By meeting's end, we'd established a quarterly family educational council where all perspectives would be considered, with final decisions remaining with Christopher and Victoria as parents. The Educational Trust would continue funding enrichment experiences reflecting both structured learning and exploratory discovery. More importantly, we'd begun reframing our family dynamics from hierarchy to ecosystem, diverse elements creating a more resilient whole than any single influence could provide. 6 months later, standing in the audience at Porter School's Spring Science Exhibition, I witnessed the fruits of our new family collaboration. Emma's project on astronomical navigation techniques throughout history reflected both Beverly's emphasis on historical context and my encouragement of hands-on experimentation. Ethan's ecological study incorporated Lawrence's rigorous data collection methods and my focus on creative presentation. Both children moved confidently between these approaches, integrating structure and exploration with growing discernment about when each served them best. Victoria stood beside me, her professional facade softened by genuine pride. "They're thriving," she acknowledged quietly. "This balanced approach is producing results I wouldn't have imagined possible." "Balance is the key," I agreed. "Not compromise where everyone loses something, but integration where everyone contributes their strengths." Christopher joined us, slipping an arm around Victoria's waist. "The foundation paperwork came through yesterday," he mentioned. "Martin says we can begin the application process for community education grants next month." The Thornhill Williams Family Foundation represented our newest collaboration, a philanthropic initiative funded by the Waypoint Fund to support educational innovation, combining academic excellence with creative exploration. Beverly and Lawrence had eventually agreed to serve on the advisory board, contributing their expertise in strategic planning while gradually expanding their own educational philosophy. As we gathered that evening for our now regular family dinner, I watched Emma explain celestial navigation to her grandfather, while Ethan helped his grandmother understand the ecological impact of urban development on local wildlife populations. The conversations flowed naturally between structured analysis and imaginative possibilities, the children moving confidently between these complementary approaches to understanding their world. I hadn't won a battle for control or influence. Instead, we'd all discovered something far more valuable: the rich potential of collaborative nurturing across generations, each contributing unique strengths to create opportunities none could provide alone. "To family," Christopher proposed, raising his glass in a toast that echoed Lawrence's Thanksgiving pronouncement, but with a fundamentally different philosophy. Not to achievement alone, but to wholeness, curiosity, and the courage to grow beyond our limitations. As glasses clinked around the table, I caught Victoria's eye and recognized in her expression the same quiet satisfaction I felt. Not perfect harmony, certainly, but genuine progress toward a family system where diverse voices strengthened rather than fragmented our shared purpose. Sometimes standing up for yourself means more than demanding recognition. It means creating space where everyone's contribution is valued, where rigid either-or thinking gives way to both and possibilities. The Educational Trust opened that space initially, but what sustained and expanded it was something money couldn't buy: the demonstrated benefits of embracing multiple perspectives rather than insisting on singular authority. The twins would grow up understanding something precious. That learning, like family, thrives not through conformity, but through thoughtful integration of diverse approaches, a lesson worth far more than any trust fund could provide. Up next, You've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.